Halifax is going through some, let's say, big changes at the moment because with the immigration that we've had in both from overseas as well as what's been going on from across Canada, we are facing some pretty good transit problems, and we wanted to just give you some ideas about what's going on, what some of the solutions are, and that's what we're going to cover today. First of all, let's go through what actual transit there is here within Nova Scotia, Halifax Regional Municipality, because if you're moving here, you probably don't really understand. So let's cover that first of all. We really have here Halifax Transit, which primarily means we're talking about bus routes. Now, there is also two ferries that come from Dartmouth kind of directly into one ferry terminal in downtown Halifax as well. So we do actually have ferries, but realistically, the major transit system that we have here in Halifax is the Halifax bus system that covers pretty much a lot of HRM, but there are also some drawbacks to this particular service as well. If you're not in, let's call it like the downtown core, the more built up areas. Once you get into, let's call them the suburban, let's call them the semi-rural areas, and we're talking things like Fall River, Hammonds Plains, Upper Tantallon. Where else would we? Wouldn't really be Timberley. Timberley's pretty good, but Porter's Lake, Eastern Passage potentially. These are definitely areas that are a little bit more spread out from what we would call the kind of downtown nucleus, the core of Halifax, which really does get served by the Halifax bus transit system. When you get out into those areas, realistically, it's cars. Like, you are absolutely relying on cars, and that is where some of the problems are going to start occurring if you're moving into the Halifax area. As mentioned, there is that ferry terminal that goes from Dartmouth to Halifax, and clearly Halifax back to Dartmouth. Well, there's two ferry terminals. One of those is at the lower end of Dartmouth in a place called Woodside Ferry Terminal. The second one then, and probably the one that most people would use, is actually the Alderney Landing Ferry Terminal, and that is kind of right in the heart of the downtown core. So a lot of people, if they are living close to there, you can either drive to Alderney Landing, catch a bus maybe from the rest of Dartmouth into Alderney Landing, jump on the ferry, and then you're in Halifax. But a lot of people will actually drive to the Woodside Ferry Terminal, park up there. I think it's for free at the moment. It certainly was when I used to use it. And then you can just literally jump on the ferry, get the ferry across to Halifax. It's a little bit of a longer ride from the Woodside Ferry Terminal, probably more like 12 to 15 minutes, whereas I think Alderney Landing, you're probably only on about 8 minutes, something like that. In order to address some of these problems that are absolutely coming our way, because we've been here now 17 years and there has been a big increase in that kind of transit system. The pressures that are actually going to be on the road system, the highway infrastructure, and everything else kind of surrounding people moving around Halifax. Because as a city grows in terms of population, so the infrastructure should be growing and should be improving and everything else. And that's really one of the big challenges, because there was a Dalhousie professor that said, if we don't do something about this, from a study that they had done, then we are going to be in a pretty good gridlock system. And the kind of problems we're having now, he says, are going to appear like basically a walk in the park. It's going to be a lot more of a problem unless we address it now. And certainly there are some changes coming up, and so we wanted to go into those. The first one is they are proposing 3 new ferry transit routes, which are part of something called the Rapid Transit Strategy that the government has put in place. There's going to be, like I said, 3 of those. One of them is going to be from Larry UTEC, which is kind of like the top end of Bedford. If you look at a map, you'll see kind of Halifax goes up and around Bedford Basin into Bedford, funnily enough, and then comes around the other side and into Dartmouth. And that's one of the first things that they're trying to do, is clearly get people off the roads, get them using the rapid transit system, and definitely looking at, obviously, those ferry terminals to see if we can get more people using the ferry terminal. So there's one in Larry UTEC, another one in Mill Cove, and then the third one is actually going to be in Shannon Park. And Shannon Park is kind of just a bit further up from Alderney Landing. But there is also going to be a lot of new housing in that Shannon Park area because it used to be military housing. That was in 2004, I think they left there. But now there's a new strategy to basically revitalize that whole area and put housing in there. So that's the third one that they're going to put in place. As part of that rapid transit strategy, they're also going to introduce 4 new bus rapid transit lines. So sticking to the bus transit system, they have looked here in Halifax at do we do light rail? And I think pretty much the conclusion came back that that just wouldn't work, unfortunately, for a city like Halifax with how it's been built up, with how it is right now. So they're definitely keeping all of the strategy around bus and increasing those. Looking at timelines for when these strategies are going to be implemented is roughly 1 to 8 years. And cost-wise, we're talking 189 to potentially 217 million to put all of these in place. And the big thing there was between 1 to 8 years. That's a long timeline. And there's been some pretty big changes already in terms of Burnside Industrial Estate connecting with highways into an area called Bedford Commons, which is one of the new junctions off the 102 highway around Bedford. And that has been delayed. I think they said it was supposed to be finished in the summer of 2024. It's already gone past summer of 2024, and now they're not really giving us a completion date, but I would be thinking the very end of 2024, maybe even to early 2025. So 1 to 8 years is a long time for us to be kind of deciding how we're going to fix this transit problem that we actually have, and obviously the commute and make things simpler. With the current frustration, so this is why they've kind of started looking at this, because the frustrations right now is there are a lot of bus delays. There's a lot of times you can be waiting at the bus and the bus is just not turning up. We've also got a lot of overcrowding on those buses, as well as the inconsistency of the schedules of those buses, especially in peak times. Now, the inconsistency comes because there's a lot of traffic on the roads. So the buses are trying to keep to those schedules, but with so much traffic on the road, they can't really keep it. Our infrastructure is definitely outdated. It kind of feels a little bit like, yes, a lot of the infrastructure and everything has been planned, and there's been fixes to the infrastructure, but there's been no real updates. Like I said, that biggest update that we're getting now has been the one to get from Burnside to relieve the stress of Magazine Hill coming into Bedford by putting in this new connector road. But that's been going on for 2 years. Same thing with what's called the Aerotech connector from the 102 highway close to the airport into Wellington/Fletcher's Lake area. Again, that's been over a year and a half and it's still not been completed either. Our population, Halifax here, has definitely grown pretty rapidly. And it's not just population from people coming from overseas into Halifax, it's from within Canada into Halifax. So it's the intra-migration of people coming back here. And that clearly comes with a lot of cars and a lot of demands on the transit system. Put on top of that, obviously, the ongoing maintenance of the current system we've got, which again is just fixing what we currently have. And I think that's why everybody is kind of focusing, especially as we're coming up to some local elections for the mayor. That's absolutely becoming one of the big things that the candidates are starting to focus on. And it really is a challenge now. We've also got this big population boom, so there's a lot of permits that are being signed for new construction, which is absolutely a good thing. Like, we do need more housing here in Halifax because we're still, especially if you watch the market stats that we do every month, we are still in a very strong seller's market because there just isn't the housing for the people, for the demand. Hence, we've got zero vacancy in rents and all of the fun that comes with that. But the big thing is, it's all well and good to start approving all of these building permits and, you know, the special planning areas that have just all been approved as well over the last 2 to 3 years that are allowing all these houses to be built up. But as soon as the people move in there, if you haven't fixed the infrastructure, you're just bringing more people into a problem area that's really going to struggle, such as where I live in Fall River. You know, there's now 440-ish approved new construction that's going to go ahead. Potentially that's 440 more cars that are going on the one road in and out of Fall River. So it's definitely becoming a big challenge. So in conclusion, Yes, they have some kind of a plan, but I would absolutely be looking closely at where you are looking to live, where you're looking to work, and trying to make sure that you're planning for those kind of commutes and what can happen. Because yeah, Halifax has got to start looking at the infrastructure and how we're going to grow and how we're going to actually make this much better for all of the people that want to move here into Halifax, because it's a great place to live, but we've got to get that infrastructure right.